So I wanted to address first and foremost, you called me up or you texted me a bunch of things, and because I respect you, I wanted to tell you exactly what was going on at a point where I was less annoyed, frustrated, and saw outward deceit from my perspective.
I get you. No, I totally I'll straight up. I'll head it off with. I totally get where you're coming from.
Okay.
I was under the impression that you were more involved than you were.
No,
because it had been started since I delivered that. Remember when I did the whole spreadsheet and everything of everything in the penal code? You remember my giant ass fucking document where I sorted and organized everything? Yeah. When I delivered you the paper that has all the penal code, like when I was like, hey, here it is, I've added everything in the current penal code to it. I was under the impression that you were being involved in it because I was being quote quote involved at a distance.
Yes.
Where they were like, hey, here's some things. What is your personal feedback just from an outside standpoint? And I was like, oh yeah, here's this. So I thought you were more involved than you actually were.
In fact, we tried to be involved. Archibald wrote a 32-page document writing out what was backed by legislation and what wasn't, in an attempt that we could collectively start filling those holes. Because the penal code in and of itself is just, it's useful, but it doesn't expand enough, right? Especially with corner cases and whatnot. But anyways, I will tell you right now that we sat in this room. It's been about 3 weeks now, where the discussion, particularly around the penal code, was brought up, and Justice Weiss told us that we should maintain, while the justices have the key to change the penal code, right? And this we have the comments on the document that the judicial whatever is that they have the keys to it, but they're just the mechanism, right? New legislation comes in, they're the mechanism to add it to the penal code, right? And it was very made clear that the only time something would be added to the penal code would be in the event of an emergency. For example, let's say some fucking new weapon enters the street that's devastating, right? Or I don't know, fucking anthrax, right? Do you need to wait a week?
When a new place starts getting robbed, and for some reason, because we are super extremely articulate on exactly what property is getting robbed,
which it shouldn't be. It's fucking dumb.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Right? Do you have any idea how many proposals I made about trying to reduce the number of robbery charges? We had 9 robbery charges on the penal code. It was fucking.
We're not a part of those conversations. Look, I'm going to be frank with you. The justice system, the justices today, still have been poorly trained by their forefathers. And specifically, and I'm coming from a very Western idealistic perspective, right, on democracy, is that justices are interpreters of the law. They preside over cases. They're provided with information and they make a decision based on legislation, right? The muddying that has occurred this last week is very concerning. And I say it because of the following. Number one was the deceit. We were told that this kind of thing would not happen, and it did anyways. Number two, we were given the massive, we were told they're going to change all the fines and times. We were cool with it. And then a bunch of charges dropped. Now, at the forefront, it can seem meaningless, I think, to the untrained eye, but it's actually very concerning because I would argue that it is fundamentally unconstitutional. To elaborate, if, say, you went to the justices and you were like, yo, the jump boots are coming from the cargo ship. That's all we know about, right? That's a reasonable thing for you as a marshal to do. What is unreasonable for the justice to do is to take your information without any due process, go and ban it via the penal code.
Prohibited them. Yeah.
Precisely, because number one, it is outside of their constitutional authority because they did so without a judicial hearing, without any case law, with any backing of legislation. You're effectively pretending you're Donald Trump. right? Just fucking filing executive orders and ignoring Congress.
Yeah.
But the thing is, at least in the United States, he kind of can do it because, the
well, it's the executive branch versus the judicial branch.
Right, exactly. And so what that now presents is you've now created a paradigm where the justices, the interpreters, the highest form of the law, right, are circumventing all legislative processes and legislative authority. Such that if tomorrow blue-rimmed glasses become illegal because blue-rimmed glasses are coming from the terrorist island of Sanguine, you could wake up tomorrow and be thrown into jail, and like there was no conversation about it. You don't have an opportunity to say, well, actually, that's not true. I made these myself, They
found me out, Nino.
Yeah, there you go. So that's sort of the principle of the matter.
Like, talking to different justices and judges, because obviously I socialize a lot with these people, right?
Sure.
I feel like I'm getting a feeling that there's a disconnect on the mentality of intention. So what I mean is, when the Constitution was rewritten and reestablished, right, there was an understanding with the governor that the justices at that time were in a rebuilding phase. That was like phase 1 of rebuilding, where those decisions had to be made. But they never outlined properly the different phases of reconstruction. Like, in general, we should be in phase 4 right now. And the mentality of the justices is still in phase 1. And every time we try to come to an agreement to move to the next phase, we're like, hey, we're in this next phase. We're rearranging powers because we got a more established system. But then something happens that makes them revert to the original phase 1 mentality.
I don't know why. The governor stood here and told them no. There's a literal published letter from the state officials that very clearly outlines what their role is. And I have a copy of it. They all have a copy of it.
Yeah, and I don't know. My biggest problem with our system is our legislation in general. And I know you've heard me talk about this multiple times.
I have a problem with it too.
Legislation system. Our system is horrible. We need a document that is the finite list of everything that's here, and then our legislations should be proposed changes to that document, to the code of law. We don't have a code of law. We have a bunch of ideas thrown on paper that turns into spaghetti.
Welcome to the Los Santos criminal code that's being currently written.
And that's what I've been proposing forever, is a definitive code of law.
I will tell you why it's not happening. Part of it is because I'm in this constant state of the DOJ either maliciously or ignorantly overstepping to the point where it prevents me to focus on advancing my county's laws, right? Because I then have to expend 10 times the energy they do on, number 1, education, number 2, quelling fears of the public, number 3, finding a way to write something that they can actually comprehend. Take, for example, the Right to Property Act that we just proposed. That isn't something that should have needed to be done, because fundamentally the line in the Constitution should be understood that by de facto you have the right to your property, and that a justice cannot unilaterally make a legislative decision to ban something outright. Now, I want to point out one other thing, because this I want to make sure I cover all these, and when I do present this, it's going to be more bullet pointed, but I'm kind of going off the cuffs, is that it presents another issue, right? Is you're pretty much saying the law doesn't matter, right? And intent doesn't matter. Intent really doesn't matter. Like, law is the law for a reason. There were, in the haphazard decisions in a limited room, there was a decision to ban a bunch of G6 stuff, right? Including items that
PNYs and stuff like that.
PNYs.
The stuff that the actual guards can get.
Precisely. And while there may be this feigning of ignorance and the defense of like, well, we talked to people and we fixed it. No, you didn't, because you created an environment where you're banning things without the proper review. Because had this actually gone through the mayors, been proposed via legislation, right? Call it the Illicit Contraband Act or whatever, and we can like list out things and what their reasons are. We would have, the public or us would have pointed out that that's not a thing, and we would have agreed on the language, and then it becomes a part of the penal code, right? By retrofitting things, now all of a sudden the law is very ad hoc. Now it draws the question of, when was this change made? When was it not? When was the change not made? I would argue it's opening them up for impeachment, right? Like it's a very it starts to apply politic into judicial matters. And that's fucking that's some like straight out of Tarkov type shit. You know what I mean? So, So anyways, that's my position behind it all. It's the deceitfulness of what transpired, right? I
respect it. I obviously I have my different opinions and perspectives of things. I talk to different people than you talk to. So we have different circles, right?
Oh.
I do see it as an incorrect move. I don't see it as deceitful, because that gives a more of an indication of maliciousness.
It's deceitful because we were told they weren't going to add penal charges, and they would only add penal charges in the event of an emergency, and they did the opposite. Now, it's
I can get
deceit
that.
via the collective, or deceit via ignorance, or I do think it's, if they tell us we're not doing it and then all of a sudden it pops on everyone's desk, it's kind of like you know what I mean? Like they had the ample opportunity to let us know, why didn't they? Right?
Yeah, I think sometimes they get ahead. I mean, people do this all over town. They get ahead of themselves and they revert back to their earliest knowledge of, well, how do we fix this? I can be the hero and save the day.
They're not the heroes, though. Someone's got to make them realize.
I don't argue with it. Yeah. I know. I'm not arguing with you on that point. That's what I mean, is they keep reverting back to their phase one.
A justice opened up Lang Buddha's laptop to find hacking app on it. In what democratic society do you open up a laptop without a warrant?
Let's say that you need a search warrant for that. Yeah, there's definitely issues. There is a lot of issues that need to be resolved, but I feel like we're constantly stuck in this reactionary response state, and that's all we seem to be doing. Is everybody just seems to be reacting to each other, and nobody wants to get to the action. Like,
I wouldn't say nobody. I mean, you can see a lot about legislation. I predicted oil 6 months ago.
Everyone I have spoken to that I have shown my code of law to, and I've been like, this should be how we do things. Literally everyone agrees to it, but they're like, but we're too busy making and reacting to other problems, so we can't do it. And it's like, do you realize like how laziness. Many of these problems get resolved if we do this? If we change the legislation to do this, it is going to be a massive undertaking.
Well, I can tell you that we are already doing that. At least my office in the LSPD. It's a big reason why Moss was removed. Moss spent the better part of 2 months lying to her old command members, including her ass chief, in order to make herself look good, instead of providing training, instead of driving towards, the PD driving legislation. I caught her in the act of lying. And I don't mean little lies. I mean shit that was destructive as fuck.
Oop.
There was already, she was telling me she wanted to quit 1 week or 1 day, say she didn't want to quit the next day, etc., etc. That's why I flew in Turner in order, because I'm a strong believer that if I'm not understanding something, I'm going to bring in an expert. So that's why I brought in Turner to be my PD liaison. I did. Well, he was going to be the original chief, mind you, instead of Moss. We just had a communication breakdown. But he came in, he was there to give me insight, right? Because at a certain point, you start to realize people are just trying to keep their job because they like the fancy title. And they're telling you one thing, telling someone else something else, and the lies caught up. The web of lies. Yeah. And so the moment he was put into place, and even prior to that, I've been working with Doc, et cetera, et cetera. Now we've brought in ex-Justice Bailey to be a liaison, and they're already now making legislation. Yes.
Yeah, I talked about that's a really huge pickup.
Yes.
I butt heads with Bailey sometimes, but that's because we're both very stern in our views of law, and some of those don't exactly cooperate a lot, but I have respect the fuck out of his understanding of law.
My cabinet, my team, we want this to be a proper representative branch of government. And yes, it's taken some time, and a part of that is because we've seen a lot of the faults along the way. But we are trying to create that roadmap where, like, I just got done talking to Snow about like felons and getting flight licenses, and I explained to him everyone should be afforded the ability to get a flight license. I'm not ignorant to the fact that people might get a flight license and use a helicopter for a crime. But here's the thing. We were in
a big shootout with helicopters the other day. They were literally using those tiny little Havocs to
absolutely
with multiple people and shoot at cops. And god damn, we had to deploy the fucking jetpack to counter it.
But as a government, we are not. I do not believe in Big Brother. I do not believe in assuming guilt without evidence. It's not to say, but I gave him a roadmap. I said, listen. He was like, can we shoot down these like aircrafts that are in the air? I'm like, well, ask yourself this question. What do they do? Right? Because if they rob something that was insured, is it worth escalating the violence potentially of a helicopter crash? The reality is you're dealing with unauthorized helicopters in the air. Well, guess what? You have a radar. You have tail like things.
Well,
do you not get tail IDs? Well, anyways,
have you ever used our radar?
You want to show me?
I wish I could. I don't think I have a way to show it to you. It's
I have dispatch access.
Is
well,
it?
let me lay something out, right? Well, let me lay something out real quick, just so I understand my mentality. Is that instead of saying helicopter's bad because unfair,
people,
right? Which is cringe.
5% of people might misuse it.
Right. Well, that, and it becomes like a WL like video game mentality. Like, you know what I mean? Like, let me not. Let's do this intelligently. We believe there's a problem. Let's have a fucking meeting. You know what I mean? Like boardroom meeting. Let's we have all these helicopters. What are we gonna do? Right? We don't know who's using them. They're being used. They don't have flight licenses. An avenue would be they're in the air. Get that tail rotor number. Right? See which one's landing. Get Michael Douglas is pulled out. Doesn't have a flight license, but this motherfucker's pulled out this airplane X amount of times. We're now going to send out a notice to him. Hey, your helicopter is being used multiple times over. We need either a record of who you've been giving this to that will claim it, right? That they were using it. Or alternatively, we're going to seize your fucking helicopter. You know what I mean?
Vehicle aircraft forfeiture.
Exactly. Right? So what's being done here is we're presenting an avenue for those individuals to go and get their flight license, right? And follow, the FAA guidelines. B, they decide to be lazy and not do it. And now they're at risk of losing their $2 million aircraft, right?
Yeah.
So
they're pretty pricey.
Yeah. So,
not to derail real quick, but before I forget, and well, this might be a little stirring. Did you see who picked up Moss?
Yes.
Make sure you saw that. Okay. I just want to make sure you were aware of that because it's concerning after you caught her in a web of lies. The concern that the position she's now in place of.
It was so bad. She was telling the best way I could explain it. You ever seen like those mothers that or parents where they pit their kids against each other. You know what I mean? That's what was happening in the LSPD.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it was so bad.
Now she's in the position she is.
She was telling me that Trig is a problem, and then promising, because Trig was on a scene of a vehicle getting mag dumped for no reason, right?
Which happens?
I had to respond to this.
Hey, Trig. Blap.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what happened. There's a whole thing. But I need to respond to it as a man, because people are asking me, like, we did a flicka bank. We demanded food for the hostage. They threatened to breach over it for God knows what reason, right? But then they didn't breach. We gave them the hostage. We get in the car and we get mag dumped. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, for me, as the mayor, this is a gross over-escalation that could... These people were threatening to start mag dumping and shit, right? So, as the mayor, I prevented that from happening. I told them, do it the right way if you don't agree with it.
Yeah.
I just needed a response from LSPD High Command. Like, press release, like, fucking talk to the people, right? Figure out what happened. Look into it. But instead, I get a fucking person with, like this month-long medical condition who's ignoring it. I ask for assistance, and it turns into a fucking, drama storyline out of some, like, out of General Hospital. I don't know if you know the reference.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So, anyways, but.
And, well, if it's okay with you, the reason I wanted to meet with you, I had two things I wanted to talk to you about.
All right.
Classified documents. So you saw there's a penal code for that.
The FIB ones?
Yeah, so it was originally intended to just encompass the FIB documents that were being recovered from the Polito Bank. But I requested during conversation with them, I was like, hey, can you just expand that to include any classified government documents? And they agreed, because we wanted to be able to distribute. Basically, PD has always been resistant to, from my discussions with PD and even the other marshals, they've always been hesitant on providing you guys with information, because they're like, well, they're just going to go share it with their friends. And I was like, well, no, that's they're going to have their cabinet to share it to. That's literally their job. That's their advisors. They have to share some of this. So Dark right now is working on a debrief for you in a classified document that we're going to try. Now, I don't know why they didn't give the exclusions. I requested some exclusions for it so that they could do that. And they're like, well, you can just legislate that later. So I have a couple pieces of legislation I'm going to be trying to push soon, or I'd like to talk to y'all about to help me push. And that's having classified documents. I think we were trying to figure out like how they wanted to organize it. It was going to be like 5 different classification levels, literally just level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nothing crazy, nothing secret or anything about it. But it's like, police documents in general just start at level 3. And then they go up from there all the way up to state secrets level 5. But being able to have people like, the director of the marshals or the governor or stuff like that can give people classifications for up to level 4. Level 5 would be a for your eyes only. Like, even if I'm level 5 cleared, I can't just view level 5 documents. You have to be listed as an authorized individual for that specific document, if that makes sense.
All right.
But we wanted to be able to give like the mayor's level 4 classification so that we can give debriefs and provide them to you in paper so that you can have more knowledge about that, and that there's a potential for, if you go out and misuse that and start handing those debriefs out to criminals, then you can be held responsible.
Sure.
But we should have that avenue to have an option to give you involved. We shouldn't just be excluding you because, that's a possibility. Because I fucking hate that. That is my
level 5. You should you have to turn your eyes off.
Yeah, exactly. Not a problem for me.
Some people
buddy.
got some. Oh, there you go.
No, but it's things like that was my issue with the whole contraband thing too. Is we can't head things off without giving people a chance.
Right.
So we can have avenues to intervene if it becomes a problem, but we shouldn't just permanently prohibit something because there's a chance of something going wrong, right? So we wanted to give the mayors, like, basically legislate it so that mayors can have level 4 classified access, and that we will generate documents to provide to the mayors to keep y'all up to date on like ongoing events in your state. Like Dark right now is drawing up papers to read you into a situation that the marshals have been looking into pretty heavily, involving a contagion going on. I personally don't know a whole lot about it. Dark and I have split our responsibilities a bit more. He likes to investigate paranormal shit and like crazy, like, I don't know. He's got his own thing. Shift 3, I don't deal with this bullshit. Basically, I stick with Shift 3 related shit, which, nothing crazy happens in Shift 3. He likes to deal with late Shift 1, Shift 2 bullshit. So he's writing up a document to give to you. Now, the reason I wanted to talk to you about that is because that legislation's not in yet. So if we provide that to you, I don't know whose reaction's going to be, because technically you would be in possession of a classified document. So we're writing a page in there. That's my thing, is like, look, we're giving it to you. So obviously we don't care. We want you to have it. So he's going to try and write the document up to protect you. The very front cover page will have this document is intended for access by these people, and unauthorized access to this document may constitute a violation of the penal code, possession of classified documents, subject to this fine, time, and things like that. And then it will go, the next page will have all the information that you're supposed to get, if that makes sense. But we want to be able to start providing you guys information about what's going on in the state, so that you guys can make actual informed decisions that relate to what's going on in the state, instead of just having to guess what's going on out there based on what people are telling you in the streets.
Yeah, I mean, I never, quite frankly, we haven't had to, I haven't really had to operate on what people are telling me on the streets so much. Most of the challenges, you've seen, most of the challenges that are being faced at a legislative level are very petty. Right?
Yeah, it's been reactionary, nonstop reactionary.
Instead of building up something that's a lot more meaningful and understood by the public. The public does not feel our legislation. Right? Where in an idealistic world, they would. Right?
Oh, yeah. Like, most legislation gets passed, targets just a select handful of people. Because reactionary.
Yeah. I like the idea behind it.
Yeah. The next thing I wanted to ask you about, legislation-wise, and I want to know if you would support this. In the powers and definitions of law enforcement, I don't know if have you talked to Scotty or any of the DOC yet about this?
Well, that's a whole nother matter that I don't even know where to begin, because as far as I'm aware, we never got resolution to Scotty's contest around wanting autonomy and all those kind of things.
Well, Scotty's big problem was the whole supreme authority over everything like that, because he was under when I had a hour-long conversation with Scotty about this. And he was under the impression that the San Andreas State Marshals only had supreme authority over them. And I was like, no, we have it over everyone in the state. And he was like, that's not what this document says. I was like, you're looking at the wrong document. You need to look at the powers and definitions of law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I brought up a solution to help give him a little bit more, a good start on this. And I'd like to see if the mayors would back or support this change to amend the powers and definition of law enforcement in jurisdictions. I want to have the Department of Corrections be listed under a primary jurisdiction for Bolingbrook Penitentiary. Because right now they're seen as custodians.
Yeah.
They're custodians of a state property. They technically don't have jurisdiction in there. I want to give them primary jurisdiction over Bolingbrook Penitentiary within the walls.
You're talking about enforcement, right?
Yeah. So basically, whenever because it does give them enforcement capability inside Bolingbrook Penitentiary. We don't give them sub authority anywhere else, but you give them jurisdiction inside. Like, it gives you the primary jurisdiction. This is my jurisdiction to enforce everything within there. giving them the ability to enforce it, because it still creates such a weird state right now, right? Because
I'm not necessarily opposed to that, because right now that is the state, aka the marshals. Yeah, I am open to that idea. I'll tell you, my broader concern was more of how did Scotty's contest get ignored is the first, and the second is why is it still not seeing the light of day of a hearing? And is he still trying to operate under some level of autonomy?
Somewhat, and I've been trying to support him in that too. I've been trying to give him that. I deal with Scotty a lot, and like talking to Scotty yesterday, it took him a little bit of time to really think about what I was telling him about how the law owner, because it's all fucking spaghetti law. This is another reason I fucking hate the legislation right now. And I was like, I understand where you want to go, and I want to support you in getting a little bit more autonomy, but there's too many conflictions in the legislation right now, because their power or their real authority isn't definitively defined. One thing says they might be sworn law enforcement officers, and that gets removed, and another thing says they might not be. I was like, well, if you're a sworn law enforcement officer, then how can you do this? But then they get told you can't have this power inside Bolingbrook, even though you're a sworn law enforcement officer, and it bounces everywhere.
Wait,
and
are they not sworn officers anymore?
They never say an oath, and
I brought
want
that
to get
up.
them to be.
Wait, I'm confused. The justices told me they were.
Yeah, how much do the justices go, well, that's just the intent? How often have you heard that? Well, that's the intent.
Listen, I'm going to be real with you. Half these motherfuckers need to be removed.
Oh, God, what is this?
And hopefully that was one of them. But here's... Because this is the same issue that I dealt with months ago, is it's hard to be forward thinking when you don't have activity. Half these guys aren't in the city. So where I'm driving this right now is speculative opinion coming from different justices that may be their opinion sometimes and maybe the opinion of the whole, and you never know what's up and what's down, is the cause of a lot of a waste of time, right? Because what needs to happen is there needs to be an official stance by somebody codified on these sort of matters, so then others that have to forcibly get interfaced with them can go make a decision, right? Because, and I'm going to tell you why that particular thing kind of triggered this, is I am being told, and as is in the legislation, that the DOC are going to be your number one, like if some shit happens, like faceless shit pops off or whatever, right? That you're going to get the DOC as marshal deputies, and you're going to go tackle the problem in the state. And I'm already tackling this like this in my head, in that how the fuck are they going to do that? It's like, are they sworn or not sworn? They have to be one way or another, because otherwise it's opening a bunch of like crazy questions up, right? Like, I want you to think about this for a second. You're now dealing with like fucking like some gang that's helping the faceless. You bring in a bunch of DOC because that's who you're told it needs to be your first pick, your first round draft. And you got a bunch of people that have never been in a car chase before, that have never done this, have never done that, and now all of a sudden they've completely screwed your investigation up because they did something that was illegal, right? Unlawful.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so just in the San Andreas State Marshal and Correctional Officers legislation, in the details and definitions, it does say a correctional officer is a sworn law enforcement official. The problem that the confliction is when you take that as a sworn law enforcement official, then you go to the powers and definition of law enforcement acts.
Mm-hmm.
They have no authority. They're not in here. So they're a sworn law enforcement official, but they have no authority in the state, according to that.
You
know what I mean?
I see.
So that was my first perception of how to interpret this, is that needs to be amended to give them authority in the state. to have their primary jurisdiction. Now, I agree with you. They are not trained enough to go out there and be handling business out there in the state.
I'm so confused how you hold that position. Then why? I'm going to explain why. I'm not challenging why for your opinion specifically. It's that if you hold that opinion, then why are there your first round draft?
Warm bodies, basically. I mean, it's not my personal one. If it was my choice, I wouldn't be drafting.
Why isn't it your choice?
Because they lack the training. But that's just we haven't given them the attention they deserve. I would love to go down there and help DOC become fully self-sufficient and make them a law enforcement agency that can maintain Bolingbrook as a law enforcement agency, as their own little private bubble of this is your territory, if that makes sense.
I got you. Yeah. So in regards to that, I am in support of it. I guess. That's the only change I want to make is in that powers and definition of law enforcement is under jurisdictions, which is the primary jurisdiction, giving the Department of Corrections the primary jurisdiction over Bolingbrook Penitentiary. I don't want to give them secondary. There is a concern that
or anything else.
There is a concern that opens up, and this is one of the things that I think we got to consider. Is inherently that means that if a crime takes place inside there, they could actually charge them formally with new crimes.
Which aren't they doing that already? Because they add time and fine to people.
Not that I'm aware of. I think that's more of a.
I need to go talk to them, but they've been adding time and fine to people if they're a prisoner and they're committing more acts. They add time.
That's a little bit different, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think what I'm arguing is
they shouldn't, because they don't have the authority to.
Yeah, but I think that's what we got to figure out, right? Like that entire pie. Like, okay, so now they're sworn officers. That's their jurisdiction. So does that mean the intention should be that if they, let's say, assault someone in Bolingbrook, aren't they then obligated as sworn officers in their jurisdiction to prevent dereliction of duty, right? And to uphold their job, put up an incident report, get the evidence, you see where I'm going with this? And is that something, like, I'm not advising this is what it should be, but I'm saying this can be what that change could construe. So, like,
and would that be a bad thing? Like, would we give them that authority, but then go in there and actually give them the training they need to actually conduct this stuff? Because right now they can't even pick up evidence. They don't have gloves. They don't have training on how to collect evidence. They you know how whenever they seize contraband, you know where it goes?
He's not digressing. That was a good conversation, guys. I don't know why you guys are being so hard on Barrett.